The following presentation is brought to you from the supporters of the Church of the Sovereign God.
When we look around in our standards as we have it today, I think that we would certainly understand someone even saying that the words of Jesus are relatively old by our standards. I mean, they're roughly 2,000 years ago when he spoke them, and so they're relatively old. And what happened to Israel appears to be the case with many today. Now, what I mean is this can be seen back in the book of Jeremiah. Let's go back to the book of Jeremiah, this time Jeremiah chapter 18, and it says, and they stumbled. Let's go back to Jeremiah chapter 18 and verse 15. Jeremiah 18 and 15, it says, because my people have forgotten me, they have burned incense to vanity. In other words, they're trying to accomplish things, but it's their way. There's a way that seems right unto a man. This is more of that same kind of principle. And they have caused them to stumble in their ways from the ancient paths, to walk in paths in a way not cast up, or not the right way. So we're told here that ancient Israel stumbled. And so I think we ask the question here, why? Why did Israel stumble? Well, quite frankly, it's simply because they had forgotten God. Even though God had revealed himself to them, even though God had revealed his will long before the people during the time of the days of Jeremiah were around, he had revealed himself. He had revealed his will to the people long before. This is the old path. Even though God had established a highway for them to follow, a pathway, a way for them to go in the old path. Some translations use the word highway, and that's the reason that I use the word highway there. Yet, the fact is, instead, they turned to many other highways or pathways. Jesus instructs us to strive to enter through the straight or the right path. Just like, didn't that remind you of exactly what God told them to do? Exactly. Different words, but it's the same principle. He tells us, instructs us to go through a gate is narrow, and it is not easily entered into. He didn't say it was going to be easy. He said it was the right thing to do. Let's go to Luke chapter 13. Luke chapter 13. Luke 13 in verse 24, Jesus speaking, and he says, strive to enter in at the strait gate, for many, I say unto you, will seek to enter in and shall not be able. This is into the right path. Or, to use the term back in the book of Jeremiah, it's the old path. It's the whole way of life of God. We also see that it was the only one way to the Father, is to go in that direction. Jesus Christ showing us. Let's go to John chapter 14 and verse 6. John 14 and verse 6. Jesus said unto them, I am the way. I'm going to read in words so that we'll understand what he's saying here. I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. You think of some other path? I don't think so. It's the only path. No man comes into the Father but by me, or through me. So if our goal is to be in alignment with God, Jesus Christ makes it very plain. There is only a one path, and it's through him. Now, when you really understand what God told Israel through the prophet Jeremiah, that's exactly the same thing he told them. So this is not a new lesson. He told them back in the Old Testament, and he's repeating it for us again even in the New Testament. It's the only way. Go to Acts chapter 4 and verse 12. Acts chapter 4 and verse 12. Neither is there salvation in any other, For there is none other name under heaven given unto men whereby we must be saved. It's only through Jesus Christ. The only way to receive salvation is through Jesus Christ. The only way that we're going to come to God is through Jesus Christ. That's what this is saying. That's the path. Jesus also tells us that there are other ways, there are broad ways which we can follow, and of course, they're going to end in destruction. Matthew chapter 7. Verse 13, Matthew 7 and verse 13, enter you in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many there be which go in thereof. Reminds me of Proverbs 14 and verse 12. There is a way that seems right unto man, but it ends in death. It also reminds me exactly what the people responded to God when Jeremiah told them. It says, think on these things, look and see. Here's the way. Think on the old paths, the way that you've been taught. And they go, we will not walk therein. And what happened to them? We know their history. We know they were destroyed. We know that they became no longer a people because of this. Here are some ways that, as we're seeing, that many follow. And we also see that these are ways that will lead to destruction. Yet at the same time, we also see that the way Jesus Christ offers is a good way. It is one that likewise offers rest for the soul. And in this case, the way leads back to the words of Jesus Christ. Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11 and verse 28. Matthew 11 verse 28. Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Now, it's the same kind of thinking, it's the same kind of thought, it's the same kind of sense in the words that were spoken to the people back in the book of Jeremiah. When he says, think on these ways and do this and walk and see and stand and walk and look and see what I'm going to do for you, what I have done for you. And remember back and walk in the old paths, the way that you're familiar with. And the end result is, what did God tell them? And I'll give you rest. And they said, that's not the way we want to walk. And so here in Matthew, it's the same kind of thing that Jesus is telling us. Then in verse 29, he says, take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall, what? Find rest unto your souls. John chapter 14 and verse 6. John 14 and verse 6. Jesus said unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes unto the Father but by me. The second thing Jesus tells us is, he will always be with us, showing us the way. Matthew 28 and verse 20. We've read these verses. Now we're putting them to a context of how this all applies to us today. Teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and this is the phrase that I'm getting at, and lo, I am with you always. This is to that generation that it was taught it. This is to the generation that generation taught, and this is to that next generation that generation taught, and this is that generation that generation taught. You see, the principle goes back. It's the same thing. The signposts are the same. And Jesus Christ is telling us how we should never miss the signpost.